A police officer thought Christmas Eve would be another routine night of patrol. But when Officer Ethan Granger and his loyal canine partner, Rex, spotted a young girl in a red coat searching through a dumpster in the freezing snow, he made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. What started as a moment of compassion revealed a heartbreaking secret no child should ever carry and led to a journey of hope, family, and redemption that none of them expected. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you are watching from. We love to see how far our stories travel. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel to watch the next stories by clicking the subscribe button right below this video. Thank you. Amen. Pine Hollow looked like it had been dusted by the careful hand of some patient winter god. Snow lay in silver-blue layers over the clapboard storefronts and the old brick courthouse, over the cedar-shingled roofs that hunched together against the December wind, over the iron benches on Main where, in warmer months, gossip bloomed like petunias. Tonight, Christmas Eve, the town was a hush of warm windows and drifting carols, the faraway bell of St. Bartholomew's counting the hours with sleepy dignity. Out past the last string of lights, where the commercial district surrendered to a scatter of warehouses and a sprawling supermarket, the dark gathered in deep pools between loading docks and dumpsters. The air had that bite it gets just before midnight, clean, metallic, a little cruel, and it pressed through seams and collars with a determination that felt almost personal. Ethan Granger steered Unit 12 along the service road that looped behind Hendricks Market, the cruiser's tires whispering over crusted snow, the light bar black and quiet. He was 38, broad-shouldered without looking like he'd ever tried to be, the kind of fit you get from carrying gear and hauling bad days up stairwells. His face held the history of late shifts and early grief, a square jaw softened by a few days' stubble, crow's feet etched by sun and squinting and maybe a few memories he didn't care to name, and eyes a gray that sometimes looked blue under the right sky, too observant for their own peace. The uniform on him was strictly regulation and yet somehow personal. Winter jacket zipped to the throat, radio mic clipped high, body cam steady at midline, nameplate polished out of habit. He wore the duty like it was both armor and penance. Ethan had come back to Pine Hollow 2 winters ago after his life split along a fault he hadn't seen coming. People here remembered him as the kid who played shortstop on the Summer League and fixed his own carburetor. They had folded him back into the town with casseroles and nods, the way small towns do. But there are some distances casseroles can't cross. He kept his apartment spare and his schedule full. There were nights when silence felt like a living thing. Unit 12, status check. Dispatch came warm and honeyed through his shoulder mic. The voice belonged to Delia Quinn, early 40s, quick laugh, a widow who wore her wedding ring like a fact and not a wound. She had a knack for hearing what officers didn't say. Unit 12 still with me? 12's good, Ethan said. He kept it professional, but he pictured Delia's knit mug cozy, the one with the little reindeer, and found to his surprise that the thought steadied him. Copy, she said. Santa reports minor sleigh delay due to headwinds. A thread of dry humor, gentle, on purpose. Tell him we'll sand the runway, Ethan replied, because he knew the dance and because the town liked to pretend the world could be softened with a joke. On the passenger seat, Rex lifted his head. The German Shepherd was 6 and carried himself with the calm gravity of someone who had earned his scars. He was sable black and tan, thick-coated and powerful through the chest, with a white-flecked whisker line that had not been there last year and a healed crescent scar along his right foreleg, a pale comma in a paragraph of muscle. His ears were large and expressively mobile, one perked like a question, the other relaxed like an answer, and his eyes were amber, intelligent, searching. If Ethan was the armor, Rex was the heartbeat beneath it. He wore his canine harness snug, the patch reading police stitched firm and square, the handle worn smooth where Ethan's fingers sometimes unconsciously found it in crowds. Rex had the soul of a guardian and the patience of a monk. He tolerated paperwork days like a saint and approached door breaches with a dancer's focus. Around people he was polite, around children, gentle. Around the stormed insides of his handler, attentive in the way dogs are, tuned to frequencies humans pretend not to broadcast. Ethan had not been sure he wanted a partner again of any species. Attachment had felt like tempting fate, but they had matched him with Rex after a string of break-ins rattled Pine Hollow, and the first time they worked a track in freezing rain, The dog had looked back at him with a straightforwardness that admitted no bargains. "You come with me, and I will not let you be alone." The cruiser's heater hummed. Somewhere behind Hendrick's dumpsters, a plow coughed and scraped at the far edge of the lot. Ethan's breath fogged the inside of his collar. He tugged his knit cap lower beneath the uniform hat, a small concession to the wind. The radio murmured, a traffic stop on 3rd, a welfare check on Birch. The town was doing what towns do at midnight on Christmas Eve, settling, forgiving, hoping the night would grant a reprieve. Ethan told himself he believed in reprieves as a matter of policy. Belief, the private kind, was harder. Snow ticked against the windshield in delicate pinpricks. He thought, briefly, of a different windshield, of wipers hopeless against spring rain, and the way sirens sound when you're praying they won't be for you. He set the thought down the way you set down a hot pan, carefully, without looking like it mattered. He had a goal tonight and had made himself say it out loud in the mirror before he buttoned his jacket. Do the job well. Keep them safe. Keep yourself steady. It was the sort of modest vow that lets a man climb through 12 hours without falling into the holes the day leaves open. "Wind chill's dropping," Delia said into the mic to nobody and everybody. "We got frostbite in the forecast. Holler if you need coffee." Ethan smiled. Small, reluctant, real. Rex yawned, a jaw-cracking yawn that showed white teeth and pink tongue, then pressed his nose to the glass and fogged a neat oval. Ethan tapped the brake's snowpack, and the cruiser's headlights slid across a row of green dumpsters, like stage lights exposing actors in arresting tableau. Cardboard collapsed and banded. Crates, a mountain of once-fresh pine wreaths listing like a ship under too much cargo. He was about to idle past when Rex went from relaxed to ready in the length of a heartbeat. The shift was a thing Ethan felt in his bones, the way the dog's torso gathered itself, the ears arrowed forward, the breath sharpened, the nose widened its map of the air. A low rumble started in Rex's chest, not an alarm yet, but a warning chime, and "I hear what you don't." Ethan's hand went to the light bar controls without thinking. He didn't hit the full Christmas tree, no sense spooking whoever or whatever was back there, but he killed the cruiser's headlights, let the night widen, then tilted the handheld spotlight and thumbed its rubber switch. Before he lit the beam, he rolled his shoulders to loose anything tight, scanned the sightlines, clocked the way snow had collected in a drift along the cinderblock wall. He noted footprints, 2 sets, booted, probably employees, older, iced over. Another set, shallower, fresh, small, the kind that sink only a little and fill quickly with powder. The wind moved and brought with it smells. Cedar from the wreath pile, yeast and sugar from the bakery vents, the tang of spilled citrus and something else feather-light, human, skin and wool, and the tired ghost of a cheap perfume that had been asked to do more than it could. "What do you have?" he whispered, but it was for Rex, not the radio. The dog's only answer was a soft huff, gaze locked on the wedge of shadow between the 2nd and 3rd dumpsters. Ethan let his breath fall into the metronome rhythm he practiced on range days. He told himself this could be a raccoon, a stray dog, a teenager looking for mischief, or a place to share a bottle and a dare. He did not let himself think of the other things nights hide the teeth, the corners, the desperate decisions. He knew the math of desperation. He put the cruiser in park, set the brake, cracked his door slow enough that snowflakes fell into the gap like curious moths. Rex, keyed to the cue, waited for the release word, eyes bright, quivering only in the line of his shoulders. "With me," Ethan said quietly, the syllables a key in a lock. Rex came out in a smooth slide of muscle and discipline, the leash slack like a promise. The cold knifed face and hands, Ethan felt it in his teeth. His boots creaked in the snow-new snow sings, old snow whispers. This made that small, complaining sound like a floorboard under an honest man, and the beam of the handheld light made an obedient white circle where he pointed it along the plowed verge. He cast the light low first, a habit learned from old cops who said the ground tells the truth faster than faces. The small prints crossed, doubled back, edged toward the dumpsters, and disappeared into an area scuffed by more frantic movement, an irregular tangle that said, hesitated, decided, returned. He angled the beam up. The shadow crouched and tried to become part of the bigger shadow that held it. There was a tremble in that effort. an involuntary shiver like a bird trying not to move its own feathers. He did not speak yet, not because he wanted to surprise whoever it was, but because there is kindness in letting a shape assemble slowly into a person when the night has left them raw. Rex gave him a quick look, the miller's knot of their years together tightening, then kept his eyes forward, posture cheating toward protective. Ethan took another step, then two. His free hand lifted a fraction. Not surrender, not command, something gentler in between. He knew the posture because Delia had once called it what it was in a late-night bull session, a man offering the world a truce he isn't sure it will accept. The beam climbed the dented metal panel, slid across a torn Hendrix sticker, snagged on a strip of duct tape, climbed again, and found red. It wasn't red like the neon that screamed bar open on the corner of Main and Juniper. It wasn't red like squad lights punching winter apart. It was the plain, stubborn red of a wool coat that had lived past its promises. The color had been scuffed to a dulled cranberry along the hem where salt had chewed at it. The cuffs were darker from friction and weather. It was too thin for the night and too big for its wearer, who had drawn the sleeves down over small hands and then tucked those hands into opposite elbows the way cold teaches you without a mother to instruct you. A hood lined in fake fur framed a face that was both young and older than it should have been. She was a girl 12 maybe, though underfed kids are hard to clock pale in the way that speaks of indoor air and skipped meals more than Scandinavian ancestry, with a scatter of freckles faint as misplaced snow across a nose that had learned to sniff for luck. Her hair dark, certainly, possibly brown, but made black by melt straggled in damp ropes along her cheeks, escaping from beneath a knit cap that someone had loved once and someone else had mended with unembarrassed stitches. Her boots were men's, too big, laced tight around the ankles, the toes scuffed to gray. The hand not trapped under the opposite elbow clutched the lip of the dumpster as if holding onto the edge kept the world from tilting. The look she sent into the spotlight was not the theatrical defiance of teenagers who practice rebellion in mirrors. It was the quick, appraising animal look of something that has traveled too far and is not sure it has made it to safety. There was surprise there, yes, and the brittle readiness to run, but there was something else, an exhaustion so clean it had worn through fear. Ethan felt it hit him in a part of himself he had boarded up. He didn't speak her name because he didn't know it yet. He didn't speak at all. For one beat, then two, letting the beam drop a fraction so it wouldn't blind her, letting her eyes adjust enough to see that the black shape beside him with the quiet, monumental head was a dog and not a wolf, that the man behind the light wore a badge and a face that, for all its scars, was not built to hurt. Rex's tail made one slow arc, peaceable, inquisitive, and then stilled. Snow drifted around them, tiny feathers that landed on the girl's lashes and did not melt right away. Somewhere beyond the dumpsters, a strand of colored bulbs clicked as ice dragged them, and a red-green pattern stuttered against the cinder block wall. Ethan had the sensation sometimes on scenes like this that the night itself held its breath, the way a congregation does when a baby first cries in church. He lowered the light another inch. His throat worked. He chose the first word carefully, like a man testing ice with a boot heel. Hey. The first word had been spoken, soft as snowfall, and for a moment Ethan thought it might vanish in the wind. The girl flinched as if sound itself were a threat. She turned, holding her body sideways, shoulders hunched, one hand gripping the dumpster's edge while the other clutched something against her chest. It was not food, not quite, but a crumpled paper bag, greasy at the corners and folded over like it had been opened and closed too many times. The bag looked fragile, like it would tear with one hard breath, yet she held it as though it was the last anchor between her and the night. Easy, Ethan said, letting his voice carry the kind of calm he used with spooked horses when he was a boy. Rex, beside him, tilted his great head and took a step forward, nose working the air, body still but taut with an energy Ethan trusted. He adjusted the beam down toward the snow so it spilled light rather than speared it. The girl's face came clear. She was maybe 12, though her body had the wiry leanness that made her look both older and younger. Her skin was pale with a bluish undertone, the kind that told of skipped meals and cold nights. Dark hair clung in strings to her cheeks, tangled as if a brush hadn't touched it in weeks. Her eyes, wide and glassy, were brown, not soft brown, but dark, hard brown, the color of coffee left too long on the stove, and in them was the wary calculation of someone who had learned to read danger in every adult's expression. Her coat, that red, swallowed her whole. The buttons had been replaced by mismatched ones, some plastic, some wood, one hanging by a desperate thread. Her boots were too large, men's size, cinched with twine. Her breath came quick, white plumes that betrayed the panic she was trying to smother. "What's your name?" Ethan asked gently, crouching just enough to reduce his height without making himself smaller in authority. The girl's throat moved, but no sound came. She clutched the paper bag tighter, and when she finally spoke, her voice was dry, hoarse, and tiny. "Lily May," she said. The syllables cracked like fragile porcelain. Ethan nodded, repeating it softly. "Lily May. That's a strong name." Rex gave a quiet whine, shifting his weight as though to say something important lingered in the air. The dog's nose lifted toward the darkness beyond the dumpsters, then toward the alley's mouth. His hackles didn't rise. It wasn't danger he sensed, but something else, a trail leading outward. Ethan filed that away. Rex's instincts were seldom wrong. "Lily," Ethan said, easing another step closer. "What are you looking for out here?" The girl's eyes darted to the bag, then back to him. Her lips parted, and the words escaped like she had to push them through locked doors. "Food." It struck Ethan like a blunt impact to the chest. Not drugs, not mischief, not trouble, just food. "For who?" His question was more reflex than strategy. Her gaze fell, lashes crusted with ice. She whispered, "My little brother." The answer changed the shape of the night. Ethan felt the ground shift under his boots. A child scavenging in dumpsters was one thing. A child scavenging for another child was something altogether different. Before he could speak again, Rex's low growl bubbled, but it wasn't threat. It was insistence. He pulled slightly at the leash, nose now tracking to the far side of the lot, to where Snowbank met chain-link fence. Ethan followed the line of his body, saw faint marks in the powder's smaller prints, staggered, almost hidden where drift piled high. "Lily," Ethan said, voice firm but gentle. "Where's your brother now?" She hesitated, clutching the bag until it crinkled loudly in the quiet. Ethan waited. Patience was sometimes the only key. At last she lifted her chin, as if some small trust clicked inside her. She pointed with a trembling finger toward the dark stretch past the fence. "There," she murmured. He's waiting." Ethan's pulse jumped, and he fought to keep his tone steady. "Show me." The girl hesitated, then, seeing Rex lower his head in what looked almost like a bow, she relented. She shuffled forward, boots dragging in snow, her breath puffing faster with each step. Rex led, nose to the ground, tail stiff but not aggressive. Ethan followed, keeping the beam low to avoid spooking her. They crossed through a gap in the fence where metal links had been bent outward years ago, perhaps by kids cutting corners home. Beyond was a small service road leading to a stretch of shuttered warehouses and one sagging house abandoned, boards crooked across the windows, a skeletal porch leaning in on itself. The dog tugged toward it. Ethan slowed, letting Lily walk ahead. "That where you've been staying?" he asked. She nodded once. No more words. As they approached, Ethan noticed details. Icicles clinging like fangs along the eaves, graffiti faded into nonsense, the faint glow of candlelight flickering behind a broken window. That light alone made his chest ache. It meant someone inside had tried to make darkness less absolute. "Wait here," Ethan said, but Lily shook her head fiercely. "I have to be with him," she whispered. The door hung off its hinges, and Ethan pushed it open with a gloved hand. The air inside was colder than out, heavy with the smell of mildew and dust, but beneath it was another scent, sickly sweet, damp cloth, fever. On the floor, bundled in a thin blanket, lay a boy. Ben was 6 at most, small even for that. His cheeks were hollow, lips cracked, and sweat shone along his brow despite the chill. He had curly blonde hair that clung in damp tufts, and his eyelids fluttered as though he was caught in dreams he couldn't escape. A cough rattled in his chest, weak but persistent. Ethan knelt beside him, shining the light away to keep it from hurting. "That's your brother?" Lily crouched fast, dropping to her knees. "Ben," she said, brushing his hair back with a tenderness that seemed far too old for 12. Ben stirred, eyes opening halfway blue, washed out, the kind that had once probably been bright. He blinked up at Ethan, at Rex, then back at Lily. "This is Officer Granger," she whispered. He's here to help." Ethan felt his throat tighten. He wanted to promise that was true, but promises were currency he had learned to guard. He had failed once before at keeping the ones that mattered most. But looking at the boy, at the way Lily shielded him, Ethan knew he was already committed. Subplot detail. The flickering candle on a crate nearby revealed something else, drawings taped to the wall. Crayon sketches of houses with smoke curling from chimneys, stick figures holding hands, trees heavy with ornaments. Lily's handiwork, he guessed. They were attempts to rebuild a world she wanted her brother to remember. Warmth, safety, belonging. The sight of them made his chest constrict. "Ben needs a doctor," Ethan said. Lily shook her head frantically. "They'll take us away." Her grip on her brother tightened. "They always take us away." Her fear wasn't abstract. It had been lived, rehearsed. Ethan had seen enough kids in the system to recognize the truth of it. Rex moved closer, lowered his head, and sniffed gently at Ben's small hand sticking out of the blanket. The boy coughed, then let his fingers curl weakly into the thick fur. Rex stayed absolutely still, a statue of patience. The girl's eyes flickered, caught by the sight. Something in her shoulders relaxed just a little, like the presence of the dog told her more than Ethan's badge could. Ethan stood, scanning the room. He noted the emptiness. No furniture but crates, no food containers beyond scraps in the bag, a few cans dented and empty. Snow drifted through cracks at the window frame. He imagined the two children here alone, the girl scavenging while her brother lay sick, and it twisted something inside him he had kept tightly bound. He glanced at Rex, who looked up, amber eyes steady, then back at the boy. Ethan knew the choice before him. Follow procedure, call it in, wait for Child Protective Services, and risk leaving them in limbo, or take a step beyond the book, at least until the boy was safe. For now, he needed to win Lily's trust. "Listen," he said softly. "I can't leave you out here. Not like this. Ben's sick and it's getting colder by the hour. Let me take you somewhere warm, just for tonight. We'll figure out the rest after." Lily's jaw tightened. Her eyes flicked to the window, the door, calculating escape, but then she saw her brother's shallow breathing, heard the cough. Her hand smoothed his hair again, lips pressed thin with decision. She looked back at Ethan, her eyes filling with something between fear and surrender. "Just for tonight? For—" Ethan nodded once. "Just for tonight. But I promise I'm not here to take you away from him. You stay together." Outside, Rex tugged gently at the leash again, nose to the ground, leading them away from the warehouse road. Ethan noted the persistence. Rex wasn't just pulling them home, he was following the scent of something connected, some lingering thread beyond the children's story. But that mystery would wait. For now, the focus was Ben. Ethan carefully lifted the boy in his arms, light as if he'd been carved from air. Ben stirred, coughed once, then sagged against him. Lily followed, clutching the paper bag with fierce resolve. The three of them stepped back into the night, the snow falling heavier now, the wind sharper, the town of Pine Hollow silent except for the distant toll of midnight bells. The weight of the boy in Ethan's arms was lighter than it should have been, frighteningly so, as if the fever had already hollowed him out. Ethan carried Ben toward the glow of a dusty crate where stubbed candles still burned low. The wax had pooled thick and hardened on the wood, a testament to how long Lily must have kept them alive night after night. He laid Ben down gently, brushing damp curls from the boy's forehead, the skin hot enough to sting even through his glove. The abandoned house groaned around them with every push of the wind. Its floorboards were warped, the wallpaper peeled in strips that sagged like tired flags, and the air smelled of mildew, dust, and cold iron. Yet scattered throughout were small attempts at life. Lily's crayon drawings, an old quilt patched with mismatched fabric, and half a loaf of bread gone stale on a paper plate. These signs of survival made the place feel more like a mausoleum of childhood than a home. Lily hovered close, arms wrapped around her chest, eyes darting between Ethan and her brother. "He's been like this for 2 days," she whispered. "I tried to keep him warm. I gave him what food I could find. But he keeps getting worse." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had seen fever steal strength before, seen it take his own son. That memory clawed at him, but he forced himself to stay present. He checked Ben's breathing, shallow, fast, rattling. The boy's lips trembled with each exhale. "Has he had any medicine?" Ethan asked. "Just cough syrup," Lily admitted. "I found a bottle in the trash bin behind the pharmacy. It helped for a while, but then it didn't anymore." Her voice cracked, and she clutched the paper bag tighter, as if everything they had left was in there. Inside, Ethan caught a glimpse of what she protected. A few bruised apples, a broken toy car, and a folded envelope with worn creases, probably opened and closed dozens of times. He didn't ask about it yet. As he considered the situation, the radio at his shoulder crackled. "Unit 12, status check," came Delia Quinn's voice, steady but laced with curiosity. Ethan hesitated. He could call this in, do what policy demanded, report the children, request immediate response from Child Protective Services, and wait. But that would mean these kids would be whisked into the same system Lily clearly feared, shuffled like papers across desks. It would mean Ben might not see a doctor soon enough. "Unit 12, you copy?" Delia repeated. Ethan pressed the mic. His voice came out steady, though his stomach twisted. 12, still on routine patrol, clear. "Copy that," Delia said. "Stay warm out there." He clicked the mic off and let silence reclaim the room. That single choice, what he hadn't told, dispatch tightened like a knot in his chest. "Why didn't you call for help?" Ethan asked Lily softly. She knelt beside her brother, brushing his hair back with gentle fingers. "Because they'll separate us. They always do. When Mama left, they came. When Daddy didn't come back, they came again. Every time they try to split us up. Grandma used to say family has to stick together. It's the only way." Her tone was firm, like a creed. Ethan saw in her eyes the bruises of abandonment layered over and over until mistrust had become her armor. "Your parents," Ethan said carefully. "Where are they now?" She swallowed hard, face tightening. "Mama left when Ben was still a baby. She said she'd come back, but she never did. Daddy, he stuck around for a while, but then he started disappearing too. He found someone else, I think. One day he said he couldn't do it anymore. He dropped us here and never came back." The words fell heavy, each one a weight this 12-year-old had no business carrying. Ethan's hands curled into fists. He forced himself to breathe, to keep the anger directed outward and not at the trembling girl in front of him. Rex padded forward, nosing gently at Ben before circling the room. His amber eyes swept the corners, tail stiff. At the doorway he paused, sniffing at the floorboards. He gave a sharp bark, startling Lily. Ethan crouched, running his flashlight over the warped planks. There, half covered in dust, was a pile of crumpled envelopes and a small notebook. Ethan picked it up, flipping through shaky handwriting. Grocery lists, scraps of numbers, half-finished letters. The last entry caught his eye. "If anyone finds them, take care of them. I can't." He tucked the notebook into his jacket. Evidence of abandonment. Evidence of failure. The wind howled harder, rattling loose shutters. Ethan turned to Lily. "You can't stay here anymore, not with your brother like this." Her chin lifted stubbornly. "If they take him, I'll run away. I promised I'd never leave him." Ethan recognized the steel in her voice. It reminded him of himself after Sarah and David died, when he swore he'd never let anyone close again. Fear makes vows stronger than love. But now, with Ben's shallow breathing echoing in the quiet, Ethan knew this girl needed more than promises. She needed someone who wouldn't walk away. The struggle tore at him, duty versus heart. He was sworn to follow law, to protect procedure. Yet he was also a man who had lost a family once, a man haunted by the echo of a nursery painted yellow, by a tiny heartbeat he never got to hear. Could he risk opening that wound again? Could he afford not to? He felt Rex press against his leg, solid and present. The dog seemed to sense his turmoil, eyes steady as if to say, "Sometimes the rule is to save the life in front of you." Footsteps thudded outside suddenly, crunching through snow. Ethan stiffened, one hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. Lily froze, eyes wide. The door creaked open, and a man appeared in the frame. He was in his early 50s, tall but stooped, with a thick parka pulled tight. His face was lined, nose reddened from cold, and a knit cap sat low over thinning hair. In his hands he carried a battered lantern that cast a weak glow. "Who's in here?" the man asked, voice rough like gravel but not unkind. Ethan stood tall, badge glinting in the light. "Police, identify yourself." The man nodded quickly. "Name's Harold Dempsey. I work nights as a janitor over at the old mill. Saw your cruiser lights near the warehouse, figured something was up." His gaze fell on Lily and the boy. His face softened, lines sagging into sorrow. "Been seeing these kids around for weeks. Tried to offer them sandwiches once, but the girl ran." Lily's jaw tightened. She stared at the floor. Ethan studied Harold a moment longer. His clothes smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals, his boots worn thin, He looked like a man who had worked too many winters without complaint. "Thanks for coming, Harold. Thanks for coming. But I've got this." Harold lingered, eyes flicking to Ben. "That boy needs a doctor. Don't wait too long, officer. Cold doesn't forgive." With that, he tipped his cap and disappeared back into the snow. The echo of his warning clung in the air. Ethan knelt again by Ben, listening to his rattling breath. He could not leave them in this place. He could not consign them to a system that would likely tear them apart. He felt the old fear rise that he would fail them as he had failed before, but he pushed it down. This was different. He had a choice this time. He turned to Lily. "You stay with me, both of you. I'll make sure you're together. But we need to get him somewhere safe now." Lily's eyes filled, uncertainty and hope warring inside. She nodded, slow, reluctant, but there. Ethan lifted Ben again, holding the boy close against his chest. Rex padded at his side, Lily following with her paper bag clutched tight. As they stepped out into the storm, Ethan felt the walls of his guarded heart crack open, just enough to let the cold and the warmth in at once. The snow was falling harder when Ethan stepped out of the abandoned house, Ben bundled in his arms like a fragile bundle of fire that could go out at any second. The boy's fever radiated even through Ethan's coat, his little body trembling in fits, the rattling cough shallow and weak. Lily followed close, her red coat sweeping the snow, one hand gripping the paper bag of treasures as if it were the last piece of her world. Rex walked at Ethan's side, every muscle tuned, nose twitching, amber eyes never leaving the children. The night outside was cruel wind sharp as broken glass, snow blowing sideways, blanketing the small town of Pine Hollow in drifts that erased footprints almost as soon as they were made. The cruiser sat at the far end of the service road, headlights dimmed but still glowing faintly like a beacon in the storm. Ethan slid into the driver's seat, carefully laying Ben across the back, tucking a spare blanket over him. Lily climbed in beside her brother, clutching his hand. She tried to rub warmth into his fingers, her own lips trembling. "He's so cold," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said, his throat tight. "We're going to get him warm. Hold him close." Rex settled in the front passenger seat, his body turning halfway so he could press his broad head gently against Lily's knee. She flinched at first, then slowly relaxed, stroking his ears with shaking fingers. The dog stayed, unflinching, lending his warmth. Ethan gripped the steering wheel and stared at the road ahead. The protocol was clear. Radio in, request emergency response, wait. Child Protective Services would come eventually, an ambulance maybe, though the storm would delay everything. By then, Ben's fever could spike higher, and children that small. He knew how fast sickness could steal breath. He had lived it once before, watching helplessly as the monitors in a hospital room had gone flat. His knuckles whitened against the wheel. Waiting wasn't an option, not this time. He pressed the ignition, and the cruiser rumbled awake. The wipers began their relentless battle against ice. For a moment, Ethan considered turning toward the hospital directly, but the county hospital was 30 miles away, half the roads likely shut down from drifting snow. Ben needed heat and rest first. The closest safe place was his own apartment. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, plain walls, a couch that sagged, but it was warm, stocked, and near enough he could get Ben stabilized before calling his old contact at the ER. He shifted into drive. The cruiser crawled forward, tires crunching over ice. The wind howled around them, making the radio antenna hum like a mournful string. Street lamps flickered halos through the snow, but beyond their reach the town looked deserted, each storefront a dark husk under wreaths that swayed violently. Christmas Eve had gone silent. Inside the car, Ethan's mind fought itself. He had sworn once that he would never open his heart again, never risk the pain of losing someone. But in the back seat lay a boy who might not see another morning, and beside him a sister who had already carried burdens heavier than any child should. Could he really sit back and watch them disappear into a system? Could he, after all his training, all his vows, fail again? He remembered the night his wife Sarah had gone into labor rain lashing the windshield, his hands tight on the wheel as he drove them to the hospital. He remembered her laughter, nervous and bright, and the way his hand had rested on her belly. Hours later, everything had shattered. The baby hadn't survived, Sarah hadn't survived, and Ethan had walked out of that hospital a shell. Since then, every Christmas had been another reminder of what he had lost. Now, on this Christmas Eve, fate had placed two broken children in his path. Ben coughed violently, the sound ragged. Lily leaned over him, whispering, "It's okay, Benny, it's okay." Her voice cracked with desperation. Ethan swallowed hard and pressed his foot on the gas, the cruiser picking up speed as it climbed the hill out of the warehouse district. The storm fought him, pushing the vehicle sideways, but he corrected, jaw set. Rex whined softly, leaning harder into Lily's side. The girl looked down at him, wide-eyed, then whispered, "Thank you," stroking his fur. Rex stayed absolutely still, a steadying weight in the storm. Halfway across town, Ethan's radio crackled again. "Unit 12, status check. Roads are deteriorating. We're advising non-essential patrols to head in." Delia's voice cut through the static, warm but firm. Ethan hesitated. He could admit what he was doing. He could call for backup. But what would happen? Paperwork, investigations, children separated. He couldn't let that happen. Not tonight. He reached for the mic, then stopped, letting it drop back against his chest. "Unit 12 still on patrol," he muttered finally. Silence answered him. The drive stretched into eternity. Snow piled against the windshield faster than the wipers could clear. Each intersection was a gamble of ice. Ethan gritted his teeth, whispering a prayer he hadn't spoken in years. Not this time. Please, not this time. When he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw Lily holding Ben's hand, whispering stories to him. "Remember the Christmas tree Grandma used to make, with popcorn on the strings? And remember the cookies with the sprinkles? We'll have that again, Benny. You just wait. We'll have that again." Her voice trembled, but she kept speaking, weaving memories into a fragile net to keep her brother tethered. Ethan blinked hard against the sting in his eyes. They reached his apartment complex on the far side of Pine Hollow, a squat building of brick and faded shutters. He pulled into the lot, parking as close as possible. The storm swirled around them like a living thing. Ethan turned to Lily. "Stay close to me. Hold on to Rex. He'll keep you steady." The girl nodded, sliding out of the car into the gale, one hand gripping Rex's harness. The dog moved carefully, keeping his weight solid so she wouldn't slip. Ethan cradled Ben against his chest, shielding him from the wind as he hurried them across the lot. Inside, the stairwell smelled faintly of old paint and radiator heat. Ethan's apartment was on the second floor. He fumbled with his keys, shouldered the door open, and ushered them in. Warmth enveloped them. It wasn't much, but compared to the abandoned house, it was a haven. The small living room was sparse. A couch, a coffee table with neatly stacked case reports, a few dishes on the counter. No Christmas decorations, no tree. Ethan had stopped celebrating long ago. He laid Ben gently on the couch, tucking blankets around him, then went to switch on the kettle. He grabbed the emergency medical kit from the cabinet, the one he kept mostly for Rex, but that would now serve a greater need. Thermometer, cold compress, fever reducer. He worked quickly, movements practiced. Lily watched from the armchair, arms wrapped around her knees. She seemed smaller in the glow of the lamp, but her eyes never left her brother. Rex sat at her feet, ears twitching, gaze steady on the boy. As Ethan knelt by Ben, dampening a cloth to cool his forehead, he felt the weight of his decision. By bringing them here, he had crossed a line. If anyone found out, he would face questions, maybe even suspension. But watching Lily's hand resting protectively on her brother's, hearing the boy's shallow breaths, Ethan knew he couldn't have chosen differently. The kettle whistled. He poured hot water into 2 mugs, adding cocoa powder he'd kept in the cupboard, though he never used it. He offered one to Lily. Her eyes widened as she wrapped her hands around the steaming cup. She whispered, "Thank you." Ethan nodded but didn't speak. Words seemed too small. The storm battered the windows, the only sound besides Ben's breathing and the occasional creak of pipes. Ethan sat back, exhausted, staring at the children in his home. He thought of Sarah, of the family he had lost. For years he had believed his life was over, that he would drift through empty nights until the end. Yet here, in the glow of his modest apartment, with a sick boy on his couch and a girl in a tattered red coat sipping cocoa beside his dog, Ethan felt something stir he thought he'd buried forever. Hope. He closed his eyes for a moment, whispered silently, "Please let him make it through the night." The storm eased by morning, though its remnants still clung stubbornly to the town. The snowbanks outside Ethan's apartment glittered in the weak winter sun, their jagged edges catching pale light that filtered through the blinds. Inside, the warmth hummed from old radiators, filling the small space with a steady rhythm that seemed to battle back the silence that so often haunted Ethan's home. Ben lay on the couch, swaddled in blankets. His fever had broken some time before dawn, leaving his cheeks flushed but no longer deathly pale. His chest rose and fell with deeper breaths, still fragile but steadier, like a boat no longer caught in the teeth of a storm. Ethan had stayed awake beside him most of the night, listening, counting each breath with the vigilance of a man who had once failed to hear the last. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor near her brother, her tattered red coat discarded at her side. For the first time, Ethan saw the clothes underneath. A faded sweatshirt with a cracked cartoon print and jeans cuffed high above boots too large for her. She looked smaller without the bulky coat, her thin shoulders hunched forward, her hair a dark curtain around her face. Yet her eyes never left Ben, fierce with the protective love that had carried her through nights of hunger and cold. Rex lay at her side, his great head resting across her lap. She absent-mindedly stroked the thick fur between his ears, and though her movements were tentative at first, soon they grew steady, like she had found comfort in the silent guardian beside her. Ethan busied himself in the kitchen, though there wasn't much to work with. He scrambled eggs, reheated soup, and laid out slices of bread toasted golden. His apartment was simple, nearly bare of personal touches, but now it smelled like food, like life. He carried the plates into the living room, setting one on the coffee table within Lily's reach. "You both need to eat," he said gently. Lily looked up, suspicion flickering briefly across her face, then gratitude. She handed the first piece of toast to her brother, holding it steady as Ben weakly nibbled the edge. Only when he'd taken a few bites did she pick up her own. Ethan watched in silence, something tight in his chest. He had almost forgotten what it looked like to have people eat at his table. Hours passed with quiet routines, cooling Ben's forehead, coaxing him to sip water, watching Lily tuck the blankets more securely around him. When the boy finally drifted into a deeper sleep, Lily's hands stilled. Her gaze shifted to the paper bag she had guarded fiercely all night. She pulled it close, hugging it against her chest as if afraid it might be snatched away. Ethan noticed. He had respected her silence so far, but now he knelt across from her, his voice calm. "Lily, what's in the bag? You've kept it close since last night." Her eyes darted to him, wide, guarded. For a long moment she said nothing, just twisted the worn paper between her fingers. Finally, in a whisper thin as glass, she said, "It's the only thing Mama left us." Slowly she reached inside and withdrew a stack of envelopes. They were creased, stained, edges frayed. Some had tiny hearts drawn in pen on the corners. Others were smudged from being opened and refolded too many times. Lily held them delicately, as if one wrong move might cause them to crumble. "She wrote us letters," Lily said, her eyes shining. "Said she was sorry. Said she had to leave, but she'd come back. She promised." Her voice faltered on that word. She swallowed, pressing the envelopes tight against her chest. "I've been waiting. Every night I tell Ben Mom is coming back. I keep these letters so he'll believe me." A silence settled over the room, heavy with the weight of hope, stretched too thin. Ethan reached out slowly, and after a hesitation, Lily handed him one envelope. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was hurried, uneven. The words inside were full of promises. "I'll be back soon. I love you more than anything. Stay strong for me. Don't give up on me." Ethan closed his eyes. He knew false hope when he saw it. The woman who had written these words had not come back. She had left her children with scraps of paper instead of presents. And yet, looking at Lily, Ethan understood why she clung to them. Because sometimes words on paper are the only warmth left when the world has gone cold. He gave the letter back gently. "You've been carrying this for him. For both of you." Lily nodded, tears brimming but unshed. "If I stop believing, then he'll stop. And if he stops, I don't know what happens." The truth pierced Ethan deeper than he expected. He realized with a start that he was no different. He too had lived with his own version of folded letters, memories of Sarah's laughter, of the nursery painted soft yellow, of a life he kept replaying as though if he clung hard enough it might return. He had been holding on to ghosts, pretending to survive by never letting go. He looked at Lily and saw a mirror. two people clutching illusions to avoid the pain of admitting loss. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. Maybe the point wasn't to cling to what was lost. Maybe the point was to fight for what was still here, fragile and trembling in front of him. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. Ethan stiffened, instinctively reaching for the sidearm at his belt. Rex rose instantly, ears perked, body taut but silent, waiting for his signal. Through the peephole, Ethan saw Mrs. Callahan, the landlady. A woman in her late 60s, she had a wiry build and hair dyed a stubborn shade of auburn that clashed with her floral sweaters. Her sharp blue eyes missed little, and her reputation in the building was one of fierce independence mixed with surprising kindness. She carried a grocery bag in one arm. Ethan opened the door a crack. "Morning, Mrs. Callahan." She sniffed, peering past him. "Saw your lights burning all night. Thought you might need supplies with this storm. Got milk, bread, and some apples I had extra." Her gaze sharpened as she caught sight of Lily peeking from the couch. "And who's this?" Ethan tensed. "Family friends, just until the storm clears." Mrs. Callahan studied him, then the girl, then back again. Something in her softened. "Well, family or not, those children need a good meal. You'll find a pie in the bag, too. Merry Christmas, Officer Granger." She handed him the groceries without another word, though her eyes lingered on Lily with quiet sympathy before she left. Ethan closed the door, exhaling slowly. He knew questions would come eventually, but for now the children were safe. Later, as Ben slept, Ethan sat at the table with Lily. The girl fiddled with the letters again, tracing the hearts drawn on the corners. He placed his hands on the table, steady, and said, "Lily, I need you to hear me. I don't know if your mama's coming back, but I do know this. You and your brother deserve more than waiting in the cold. You deserve a chance to be safe, to grow up without wondering where the next meal comes from." Her lips trembled. "But what if they take us away from each other?" "They won't," Ethan said firmly. "Not if I have anything to do with it." It was the first time he spoke the thought out loud, and it solidified in him like stone. He wasn't just protecting them for a night. He was going to fight for them, however complicated, however many forms, hearings, and rules it would take. He would not let them disappear into a system that failed them. Rex shifted closer, pressing his head into Lily's side again, sealing the promise. Ethan leaned back, staring at the quiet apartment. For years he had lived in emptiness, afraid to love again, afraid to lose. But looking at Lily's thin frame hunched protectively over her brother, at Rex's unwavering loyalty, Ethan realized something profound. He had been running not from grief, but from the risk of living again. Now, in this modest room on Christmas morning, he made his choice. He would not let these children face the world alone. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of paperwork, hearings, and inspections. What began as a single decision on a storm-choked Christmas Eve became a campaign one that pulled Ethan into rooms where uniforms carried no weight and only truth could stand against bureaucracy. For the first time in years, he found himself fighting for something more than duty. Morning started with Lily's soft footsteps padding to the kitchen, her small voice asking if she could help pour cereal, her eyes brightening each time Ethan answered, "Of course." Evenings ended with Ben curled up against Rex, the dog's chest rising and falling in sync with the boys, a rhythm that soothed him into dreams without fever. Ethan had grown used to silence at home, but now the apartment hummed with life questions, laughter, even tears that belonged not to him alone. But beyond those walls, the system loomed. The courthouse in Pine Hollow was an old red brick building with stone steps worn smooth by decades of shoes. Its high windows always seemed to trap the winter light, making hallways glow pale and cold. On the morning of the emergency guardianship hearing, Ethan stood at the foot of those steps with Lily's hand in one of his and Ben's smaller one in the other. Rex sat pressed against his leg, a steadying weight. Ethan wore his best uniform-pressed blues, polished shoes, badge gleaming, but he knew this fight would take more than polished brass. Inside, they were led to a waiting area where other families sat on hard benches, mothers wringing hands, fathers pacing, children clinging to guardians who may or may not last beyond the hour. The smell of coffee and disinfectant filled the air. A woman in her 40s entered, clipboard in hand. She was Angela Morris, the appointed social worker for the case. Angela was tall, with a lean frame, auburn hair pulled into a bun too tight, and glasses that perched precariously on her nose. Her expression was firm, professional, but not unkind. She had spent years navigating between children who had been failed and adults who swore they could do better. Life had made her skeptical, though a softness lingered at the edges of her eyes. "Officer Granger," she said, her tone brisk. "We'll begin shortly. Are you prepared?" "As much as I can be," Ethan replied. His voice was steady, though inside his chest, unease rippled like a fault line. Angela's eyes swept over Lily and Ben. The girl straightened, clutching her paper bag of letters. The boy leaned into Ethan's side, fingers tangled in the dog's fur. Angela nodded once, then returned to her papers, though Ethan caught the faintest flicker of something human in her gaze. When they were called into the courtroom, the weight of the moment pressed down on Ethan's shoulders. The chamber was small but solemn, wood-paneled walls lined with dusty law books, the American flag standing sentry in the corner. Judge Hernandez presided from the bench, a man in his early 60s with olive skin, thinning silver hair, and sharp eyes behind half-moon glasses. His reputation was one of fairness, though his patience for unprepared cases was razor-thin. The hearing began with formality documents read into record, background checks presented, Ethan's file laid open like a life dissected. Angela Morris testified first, describing the circumstances of the children's abandonment and Ethan's role in sheltering them. She was careful, professional, but her voice softened when she admitted the children appeared healthier and more stable since staying with him. Then came Ethan's turn. He rose, his tall frame straight, his voice low but steady as he spoke of finding Lily that night, of the fevered boy in his arms, of the choice he had made in the storm. He didn't embellish. He didn't plead. He spoke like a man stating facts but carrying their weight in his chest. When the attorney for the state questioned his readiness, pointing out his lack of prior parenting, his dangerous profession, his solitary life, Ethan didn't flinch. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I can promise this. I will not leave them. I will not let them be torn apart again." The words hung heavy in the room. Then Judge Hernandez called on Lily. She froze at first, her small shoulders trembling as she walked toward the witness chair. The microphone loomed too large in front of her. Ethan wanted to reach for her hand, but he stayed back, letting her courage be her own. The judge leaned forward, his voice gentler now. "Lily May, do you feel safe with Officer Granger?" Her hands gripped the edge of the chair. She glanced at Ethan, then at Rex, who had quietly padded closer, sitting just at the rail, eyes locked on her with canine steadiness. Lily's breath caught. "Yes," she whispered. "Can you tell me why?" the judge asked. She swallowed, her voice quivering. "Because he doesn't leave. Because when everyone else did, he stayed. He didn't promise things and then disappear. He was there when Ben was sick. He gave us a home. And Rex..." She smiled faintly through tears, glancing at the dog. "Rex chose him, too. Dogs know. And if Rex trusts him, then I do." The courtroom fell into a hush. Even the clerk looked up from her notes. Ben, too young to speak formally, wriggled free of his seat and toddled up to Ethan. He lifted his small arms and Ethan knelt, pulling the boy close. The sight seemed to say more than any testimony. Judge Hernandez sat back, tapping his gavel lightly against the desk, deep in thought. Finally he spoke. "This court has heard the facts, seen the children, and considered the risks. Officer Granger, you are not a conventional guardian, but sometimes convention fails where compassion succeeds. The children believe in you. And I believe they deserve stability. I hereby grant you temporary guardianship with a path toward full custody pending review." The gavel came down, sharp and final. Relief washed through Ethan like thawing ice. Lily let out a sob that broke into a smile. Ben clapped his small hands once, not fully understanding but sensing victory. Rex gave a low bark, almost triumphant, tail sweeping once against the wooden floor. Angela Morris closed her folder, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she offered Ethan the briefest nod of respect. Outside, snow had begun again, gentler now, flakes drifting like feathers. In the courthouse courtyard, Lily and Ben ran circles around Rex, their laughter piercing the cold air. The dog bounded after them, his paws kicking up sprays of white, his amber eyes gleaming with joy. Ethan stood by the steps, watching, For the first time in years, his mouth curved into a smile, not forced, not fleeting, but real warm enough to fight back winter. His chest loosened, as if the ghosts of Sarah and David, who had haunted every December, had finally allowed him to breathe. A new family was not the one he had once dreamed of, but it was here, alive, running in the snow before him. And for Ethan, that was enough. In the end, this story is not only about Ethan, Lily, Ben, and Rex. It is about the simple truth that family is not always the one you are born into, but the one you choose to fight for. Sometimes hope comes wrapped in the smallest acts of kindness, like a warm blanket on a freezing night or a voice that says, "I will not leave." In our own daily lives, we may not face snowstorms or courtrooms, but each of us will meet people who need to know they are not alone. A neighbor, a friend, even a stranger passing by. Choosing to stay, to care, and to love when it is hard can change everything. If this story touched your heart, please share it with others. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories of hope and redemption. Let us pray that God blesses everyone who watches, protecting their families and filling their homes with warmth. And if you believe in the power of love that never leaves, write one simple word below to join us in spirit. Amen.